Okay.
Welcome back to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. My name is Ben Wilson, and we're so glad you're joining us this week. We're talking about a topic that can trip up about every homeschooling family at some point, which is spelling in English, whether your kids are natural readers and writers or still struggling to remember the whole I before E except after C. We're going to talk about what really matters and how to keep a smile on your face through it all. But before we begin, we want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. Their math curriculum helps thousands of homeschoolers smile each and every day, and we'd encourage you to check them out for this school year. And it's not too late to switch if you need to over at teachingtextbooks.com. Also, today's show is being underwritten by Samaritan Ministries. They are a community of Christians who pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading career or in ministry changes or in bringing moms home. And you can learn more over at samaritanministries.org/familyman. But all right, Dad, if you're ready to go ahead and get started, let's go.
Okay, well, I am. We're all busy around here at the Wilson house because we're getting ready for vacation. And so we're all packing up and leaving. In fact, the first Wilson has already pulled out of town. Ike and his wife and his daughter Jane
had his tire off 10 minutes before they were leaving. So hopefully it's all good.
I was saying this is like my dad used to do. I mean, we'd all be in the car ready to go somewhere, and he'd go, I think I need to change the oil.
Yeah.
And he would get out, like in his good clothes and change the oil.
It does feel a little bit like when we do this that we're all trying to drive. If this is an old reference, so if you're young, you probably won't get it. But we're all driving like Beverly Hillbilly cars down there. I mean, it's just like between them all, there's one solid car, So it's always a little
But
sketch.
We're taking, how many cars are we taking? We're taking one plane. And then I think
Ike and Carolyn, me and us, you guys, Sam McKenna, Josh and Kat. So I guess 5. Oh, yeah, 5.
5?
Oh, no, and Maggie and Josh. Or are they flying?
They're flying.
They're flying. So 5 cars.
So 5 cars. And between them all, I think it's got about 2.5 million miles between the 2 cars. All 5 cars.
Probably.
So
I mean, the Suburban, we cleaned it this evening, and I was like, man, I don't even remember it looking like this. It was so much dirt and buildup. It was like a whole new vehicle, other than all the rest. But
that's because it still has stuff in it from the last time you drove in a year ago.
It does have moss. Literally, I had to wipe moss off of it because it sits so long in certain spots. So, pray for us if you're listening.
Yes, pray for our families because it gets a lot. It's a lot more stressful, this, when something goes wrong. But we're hoping for a good week of vacation. We won't be here next week. We'll play a fan favorite rerun. But I hope things are going good in your school. The weather's kind of changed here. We finally have. It hadn't gotten cold. In fact, today was a beautiful day. They don't come any prettier today. But we are in the thick of fall now, and it won't be long before we hit winter. And I thought maybe we'd talk about the last couple of weeks we've been together. We've talked about, just some of the different subjects, looking at the different subjects. We've looked at literature, and we've looked at science. And Ben and I were talking, and today we're going to look at spelling and English. And Ben, I thought about starting this little segment with a spelling test. For you.
No way.
But I thought, and maybe afterwards we could have this conversation like, Dad, don't ever make me feel like an idiot.
Yeah, that's probably my least favorite feeling in the whole wide world is being made to look like a fool. So let's just pass on that one.
Yes, and I wouldn't want to go back the other way because even now, occasionally when I'm speaking, I'll put something on a marker board and somebody will say, we're writing these things, and I just scribble things so they can't really read them, because if you can't spell things, then just scribble.
I'll tell you, if you want to feel bad at spelling, and during when I was doing my at-home college classes, I did a one that was on like ancient Egypt or something because I got a history degree, and I didn't realize it until pretty far in, but I had to take the test in written form. Like it was all, like using a pencil or whatever, a pen and on pieces of paper. And I was like, oh no, because like I can spell a decent amount of words that I wouldn't otherwise if I type it, but spelling it out, there is no way to I can't go back and change it easily. I couldn't, I was so nervous doing that. And man, I got some points docked for some pretty poor spelling. So, but
Say, I'm sorry. Are you skipping from third grade
yeah,
to
that's right.
college?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you my little background in history, or my history of spelling is that I was um, 100% spelling person. So I always got hundreds. But the pattern was I would bring my spelling list home on Monday because back in the day they gave us a list. I don't know how many words were on it, 10 words, 20 words. And then every single night, excuse me, every single night my mom would go over the spelling test. And so I would practice Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. And then Friday day, I would take that test and I got 100%. Now, let me just tell you, I am a terrible speller. I probably couldn't spell any of those words that I had to study for. And so I have a bias against spelling. I have a bias against how spelling works. And later on, I'd like to talk about, that I feel like there's a truth. There are good spellers and there are bad spellers. But spelling is part of that thing that I know my wife has struggled with, not in doing because she's a great speller. So is my daughter, Catherine. In fact, sometimes we would be driving that in the car all together and Mom or Catherine go, "Hey, we could have a spelling test," which just to me was like saying to them, "Hey, we could have a spitting contest or see who can draw the best cartoons, or maybe we could wrestle." Because I knew I'd win. They knew they were going to win, and they just wanted me to feel stupid. But my wife, she always struggled with teaching spelling, and she probably tried every spelling thing under the sun. And I don't know if you remember any of the different types of spelling ways you did it, Ben. Do you remember any of them?
I mean, yeah, we did things where you'd listen to a CD and then it would be, it would give you a word like, whatever,
think of a word, Ben. It's just a word.
Hotel. And then you will do, it would give you, I think it would give you the spelling. I don't remember. It'd do something. And it was very repeating it, very slowly. And it'd be like hotel, HOTEL. And then you would, copy it out and but I do think it is tough because spelling along with math facts and a few other things are the most memorizing is just a big part of it, and that's depending on the person is just can be really fun or really boring. And obviously there are tricks and there's rules and things like that too. And I remember going through those. I don't remember all of them anymore at this point. But we tried a lot of different things. I mean, a lot of them were, doing long lists, creating lists of words we didn't know. Sometimes it was categories of different things.
You had to find the misspelled words.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to correct them, or they would have words that sound similar. I should have had a list in front of me because I can't think of any of those. Like house, rouse, grouse, and you do a certain sound over and over again. But I think the thinking behind all of these is that if you practice them enough, they would eventually stick in your head and you would be able to spell every word. And the truth is, I practice those well, and they just don't stick in my head. I think some people, they just do not stick in their heads. And people who are good spellers will say, "Oh, that's not true. You can learn these tricks." And
obviously you do learn. I mean, I do not have to look up literally every word I ever use. I mean, so you do over time learn some of them, but I mean, but I'm not a good one. And I think there's something I don't remember this ever being talked about as a kid, but, and maybe this is just something that we didn't cover, but is the whole visual spelling versus seeing seeing the words and then being able to spell it, or just having to say it out loud, because I cannot spell out loud. I mean, even simple words that I would easily know how to spell if I was writing it or typing it, if I have to say the words out loud or letters out loud, I just get lost. I can't picture the word to then to go through all the letters, and I get lost where I was. But if I can write it, or if I can type it, no problem at all. So it's really interesting. I don't know if that's just like a visual versus, because like I'm not great at like picturing something and describing things very well versus other people. So they could probably like picture the word in their head and then be like, I don't know. I just don't know how people do it differently. But is that how you would do it, or?
I don't know. I am not a good speller. I mean,
Like, do you try to see the word in your head if you were going to do it?
Yeah, I try to see it in my head.
Yeah. So like I can't really see
so
it very
but
well.
like the word, there's a couple words that I can never get right. Like banana. I just cannot do the word banana. I'm like, I do not know how many N's are in it. I don't know. I feel like there's a silent letter in there somewhere. And and even sometimes I'm so bad at it. Spell check is like, I give up. What are you trying to say here?
For me, it's definitely. I struggled a long time on that one. I can type it out so that I generally it'll be either correct or spell check and get it. But the other one is, unfortunately, if I don't slow down on that one, I really get that one off pretty badly every time.
But I don't even try when I'm typing anymore. I mean, I just like my fingers are just going, and I don't even think, oh, I wonder if I spelled that wrong, because spell check is so good.
Yeah.
And Grammarly is even better. That they do not mess up very often. I know the only ones that on spell check that get me are from or for or form, because my from always turns out as form, and it doesn't see that always as the incorrect word.
Yeah.
But
so, I mean,
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I do remember we'd play games and stuff like that, so we do the Scrabble, which I do think was fun. That is good. I always hated any kind of spelling game that was speed related, like Boggle or whatever else, anything else, or Bananagrams. And I mean, Cat and Mom were always just so insanely fast. And, like Bananagrams, it's really tough if you're doing like horse and, car and it, versus like, some long dictionary, whatever. If you're doing something long.
I've told this story several times when I were playing Boggle with my nieces, the Weaver girls, for Ben's sake.
They're all very big on spelling there.
And when we would do like Boggle, and it'd be like three dice or letters in a row, and you had to make words, and I would get like, I could only see them if they were all in the same in the same order, correct order, facing me. So it's like sat. Yeah. And then Kristen would go, oh, look, encyclopedia. Yeah. And just go all over the dial. And I'm like, this is amazing to me. All this to say is, I know if spelling is causing you a lot of grief, Mom, I would just say give up the fight. I think spelling is one of those things you plug away at. Again, my wife, she even recorded her own. She made her own spelling list where she'd tell the kids, and then she'd spell the word. But like for Ben, sometimes listening to it isn't the same as writing it down. So again, we see it differently. But I will tell you, and I believe this 100%, and I don't care what kind of expert says otherwise. I don't agree with them. I think they're wrong, maybe satanic. But that I do not think that I think there are good spellers and bad spellers, and bad spellers are always going to have troubles with it, and good spellers never are. And so what I want is, I don't want you to drive yourself nuts thinking, why can't I make this kid spell? Why can't he get it? I know. I mean, our kids, probably even Ben, they would be able to spell all the words because they were on their little list, and then they'd spell was, W-U-Z,
right.
And I'm like, you read that every six words is was.
Seriously.
Can't you see that? And it's because for some reason, but after time, a lot of those things.
That's a big thing. But I think, well, two thoughts is like, one, I don't think you're saying this, but just for anyone who's listening who's, gets frustrated by it, we're not saying if anything's ever hard, don't do it. Because obviously, that's not a rule for life kind of deal. But it's that not everyone's going to be to the level of being able to do spelling bees. You could maybe force them to do it. It's not a matter of like, could they physically maybe do it, but you're going to not smile ever probably. And there are going to be a lot of tears and frustration on their end. But two, yeah, I feel like a big thing for me was until I had to interact with it all the time, because as like a 7 or let's say a 10-year-old, unless you're right, like there's just not a lot of reasons you're writing outside of school for anything. I mean, you're not emailing, you're not texting yet, probably. You're not, chatting with anything. Like you're just not, so until really I became a teenager and had to start, I was, sending texts, sending emails, sending, chats, whatever, like until I started doing that and I actually had to use it, it just didn't really feel relevant. I mean, I knew why I needed to know it, but I didn't get good at it at all, because you're not using it for anything except writing a paper or something like that. So then once I started doing that, then it all started clicking in and you start building up all the words you use on a daily basis. And I mean, within, a little while, it's way easier. But that's kind of how we talk about with science or anything else is once you start needing it, it really starts clicking. And so as long as you have the basics, of how to, that the basic words, how they go together, the rest starts, start developing it pretty quickly.
Really, and spelling is, I think it's more useful to know how to read.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Obviously.
you're doing. Yeah. You're just looking at these words and you want to know what they mean,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's kind of like spelling in reverse. And I totally agree with Ben. We don't just quit things because they're hard, but I do think that we frustrate ourselves, we frustrate our children if we have unrealistic expectations that all kids are, because you're going to have kids who are good spellers and you're going to think, oh, they must be doing something right. And then you're going to have kids who are not good spellers and you're going to be thinking, oh, they must be doing something wrong, or I must be doing something wrong. And again, I would just plug away, pick your system, whatever you want to try a different one. Maybe something will click. And then move on to something else. Well, hey, Ben, this would be a good time to take a little commercial break. And let me just say, we want to thank Samaritan Ministries and remind you that if you've been thinking about joining Samaritan Ministries, now offers an additional new sharing option called Redeem Health Share. It's the same great ministry with Christians helping Christians, and it still involves prayer and some encouragement. But now there are some new programs and features in Redeem to provide even more flexible options. So check out Redeem Health Share at redeemhealthshare.org and join Team Redeem.
We also want to thank Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing math curriculum. We've talked about them many times because they're the math curriculum our family's used. I used it, and now my daughter's using it, and she loves it. And we think they're just one of the best out there. So if you haven't checked them out, you can get a free trial over at teachingtextbooks.com, and we really appreciate their support. But yeah, I do think that obviously reading is a huge part of that. I mean, vocabulary, even just like how sentences go together, even if it's not, super laid out in a book of like, here's the structure or whatever. If you read a lot, I really think you start understanding how people talk, how words go together, how sentences go together. You may not be able to give a speech on how it all goes together and how, you may not be able to diagram it all out, but I do think if you will understand what natural language sounds like and how to write better over time. Obviously, I think there's a lot of benefit for writing programs and all that as well. Not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying reading, if you are reading, your kid's reading a lot, you're reading out loud, that is so beneficial for so many of these things.
And even as we talk about English, I think, I just, if I was going to have to write a history on English, I would say, people were writing and people were reading, and all of a sudden someone got a job to teach that, and they started labeling things, and they said, well, let's call this a prepositional phrase. And then they made a rule, they wrote it down, and they asked their students, can you point out the prepositional phrase? And, they could or they couldn't, and they got a grade. And so that became, or they said, where's the article? Or how about some of these other parts of speech? And that gave someone a job, and that became a way to measure how well you knew the English language. And I feel like, that's what we've been doing for the last couple hundred years. And I would guess that, most of the people listening to this podcast, that's how they grew up. I know I went to a public school. I had English. I had to do these things. I had to do sentence diagramming. And, even when I was doing that, I can remember thinking, now, where am I going to use this? Why am I going to do this? And since then, when I was in seminary and I was doing Greek, they did a little bit of sentence diagramming. I didn't understand it in English. I didn't understand it in Greek. And I couldn't do it now. And actually, Rissa told me about a week or two ago, oh, we're getting ready to do sentence diagramming. And I'm like, please stop,
Right.
Because I don't.
I do think that, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think like there is a lot of tools that can be used. Like I think there are helpful things, to learn. But the thing that's so important with homeschooling again is that one thing isn't going to work for everyone. So as we've talked about so many times, this is something that my mom really changed the curriculum based off of who she was teaching. So, I mean, for a lot of this different stuff, she would, she tried it with everyone, but if certain kids just weren't getting it, like, so Dad was mentioning Kat, our sister, she just, learned all of this super easily. She loved all of this. She gets it all. It's just she really connects differently to me. So she didn't really like some of the practical. This is more writing, but when we're talking about writing, she didn't like some of the practical things as much. Like do this kind of word instead of this word. She didn't enjoy that. But for me, that was like the structure I needed. In English, I think that's kind of similar in some ways. But yeah, I don't really get a lot of it. I mean, again, a lot of it comes down to conversations that people will have. And if your kid doesn't understand that may not feel comfortable if they don't understand the conversation when someone's like, what, you don't know what a whatever is, but it's just outside of that. I really have not run into it much, but I will say like, this is more writing again, but something that Mom always did when it came to editing was she was really good about having us like edit back through stuff and think back through the way a sentence was put together and how it was sounded and, the words that were being used and stuff like that. And that was extremely helpful, even outside of specifically, having to learn every single, grammatical rule and all that kind of stuff. Just kind of getting used to how things actually read and how they sound when you're writing or speaking.
But I will say there's a lot of pressure put on teachers, on the moms, to teach this English in a way that's always been taught. And I just think if you find yourself saying, wow, I don't understand why they need to do this, then I would listen to that voice that says that and do something different. If you don't think it's important, then don't do it. I mean, I'm not trying to be some bold educationalist. I'm just like, it struck me as odd when I was a kid. It strikes me odd now, some of the reasons. I have never, ever, I shouldn't say ever. I don't think I've read an article in years that I had the word verb in the article. That where they're all of a sudden talking and they say, oh, well, that was a good verb. They just don't do that. It's almost like, I don't know, pointing out the cardinal in the picture, and that's a great little thing to be able to know, but it doesn't add much value, I don't think. Now, if you think it does and you love doing it, that's great. Do it. If it brings you joy, do it. But if it's frustrating you, or if you're one of those moms who just doesn't, if you feel this guilt that says, I don't know, we just haven't done any English, I will say your kids are going to be just fine without it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you're reading, a lot of it is they may not know the terms. That's something that always bothered me is, people would be like, oh, do you know what this is like? And it's like, I may not know the term itself, but if you ask me or ask your kid, hey, we just read this story. What's the subject of the story? Who's the hero of the story? Those things are just intuitive. It doesn't require tons and tons and tons of, diagramming and breaking down everything to do that. And English obviously encompasses a lot of different things, spelling, obviously vocabulary, grammar, and then analyzing writing, stuff like that. But it's just, I don't know. I mean, there's different parts of it. And it's just,
English is not intuitive. I mean, so if I say, what's the adverb? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're like, I don't know. Is that a describing word? No, that's an adjective. What's the adverb? I mean, lolly, 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 get your adverbs here. Hurry down to lollies,
Yeah.
But, even an ly word is an adverb, but there are still those things that you learn because you don't say he walked slow. He walks slowly,
Right.
But again, I wouldn't knock yourself out, Mom. If you're enjoying English and again, your kids love it, I hope you just keep it up. But if you're not and you're struggling in that and you're not liking it and you don't understand it, your kids are going to be fine without it. They're going to be fine without it. If they want to go to college, they're not going to have any SAT questions on adverbs or adjectives or prepositional phrases. They're not going to have any of that. So you don't have to worry about that. It's just one of those things. So again, that's the purpose of this podcast. I'm sure you can find some great English podcasts if you're really convinced that that's super important. But I'm going to guess it's not going to make you smile. The purpose of this podcast is to remind you that you're doing a great job and that you're smart enough to figure out what your kids need. And if this is not one of those things you think your kids need, or you can do it in a different way, I would do it that way and I would smile. I think Ben is 100% right. I think reading and even writing the way you read or the way you speak, I think speaking is the way that's how I write. I just write when I write. I just write what I talk, and that's probably not even a good sentence to say that. And my wife would say, sometimes you talk incorrectly. But I'll tell you, in this world that we live in, you don't have to talk correctly. I mean, do you know how many posts I see where some guy or some lady who has 100 million followers says, "It be like this," I mean, and they write in this slang language. And it's accepted. It's not even, people don't go, "Wow, that's the way you talk."
I prefer my kids not to sound like some of that.
I know it. But they talk that way. They write that way. And really, I see rules that have changed, have been dropped because that's not the way the English language works. I can remember back in the day when I had to learn to write paragraphs, and each paragraph had to have, your last sentence had to lead into the next one. And then I'm in this, not a writing class, but a kind of a marketing class for church. And they're saying, when you write, just break your paragraph up every 2 or 3 sentences. They said it doesn't have to be the old way. Just do it that way. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so we just make up these rules. And yes, we just make up these rules and those rules change.
One thing, this is not necessarily part of this, but I do think there is some... a couple things that I would have found actually useful, and I don't know if this will be the case long term because by the time your kids are grown, AI will probably just do all of it for them anyway. But one, typing I do think was extremely helpful, and I would encourage that for anyone, just because I think as you, especially again in this world, chances are your kid's going to be working on a keyboard unless they're doing something physical, which is awesome. But so that's something I really appreciated and have used every day of my life. So that's one. But two is like something that I don't know, Dad, what you guys thought about this, but like I wish I had done more with spreadsheets. Not saying as like a kid, this would be like late teens. If you're a kid, if you're kind of like, let's say it's math or you just don't want to do any of the other normal stuff. Honestly, I think it would be not a terrible idea if they're interested doing like some business software for a year, like maybe a senior year or something like that, instead of like...
I think that's a great idea, but what's that have to do with spelling in English?
It doesn't really, but it just kind of made me think of the typing. I was like, that would be something that I feel like...
yes, I don't even know how to do a spreadsheet.
Right. But it's something I come across a lot in my current job, and I feel lacking in it. But it kind of not spreadsheets specifically, but knowing how to use Word and all those kind of things is kind of part of.
Maybe that would be a good topic. We could talk about different programs that someone ought to be able to use.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe we'll cover that at some point. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean,
but I was, the thing about you're just creating learners. And, we're all in the process. I mean, I just learned, bet you within the last couple of months, my wife goes, dessert, the difference between dessert and desert in the spelling.
Because you always want more dessert.
I never heard that before. Wow. And that was like, it changed my life.
Yeah. Those are those little things.
And,
All I'll
and
say
there
is
you
too,
go.
like,
I'm 60 years old and I just learned that.
is, I don't know, when it's breaking down sentence and what every other, all the words, every word, what it's called and all that kind of stuff. But, at work and situations like that, all of my coworkers, they're all smart people. They all, did the normal public school route. But everyone asks me to proof their drafts and stuff like that, for their emails if there's something that's, important. Because one, that's my role kind of. But two is, I understand like how things, sound if you read it out loud and or if a customer's reading it. And you just kind of learn it as you go. And it's not. No. It's been no problem.
And really, the only ones who are going to use all those things that we've talked about are the ones who are going to be teachers of those very things. If you grow up to be an English teacher, you'll need that because you'll need to perpetuate the lies. So anyway.
And again, but like Kat, our sister, she's written multiple books. She loves this kind of stuff. She really enjoys that. But she enjoys it
I don't
because
think she cares about
I don't think she does either. But the parts that she enjoys, she's going to excel at it. She's going to learn what she needs, and she's been very capable with that. And you obviously have made a whole living off of writing. And
I'm a writer.
Now that, to be fair, you're not writing, Tolkien or anything like that. So, we'll just be clear, but still.
Ouch.
Yeah. Right.
Ouch.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to, I could.
He probably could, actually.
Okay.
He'd be good at that. He'd be the C.S. Lewis probably more than
Death
Tolkien.
to the Tyrant.
That's right.
Well, that's a good place to stop. And again, if you pray for us as we're going on vacation, we'll see you in another week when we're live again. Hey, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you being on this team. A lady just stopped me in church this past week. I don't even know if I told Ben this. And she might be listening right now. Jaretta stopped me in church, and she just said, they were raising their two grandchildren, and it's been terrible, and they started homeschooling and all that stuff. And she said, a couple years ago, someone at our church told me about you and your podcast. I started following it, even going back and watching the old podcast. This has helped me know we're going to be okay. And she said our homeschooling has drastically changed this year, and just because they're not worried about all these things. They're talking about relationship and enjoying their time together, and they're plugging away, just learning together. And I'll tell you that not only does that make you smile, it makes me smile. And so have a great week, and we'll see you on the other side of vacation, and smile real big.
Thanks for listening. If you need more encouragement, then visit our website, thesmilinghomeschooler.com, to sign up for a free weekly email. We also want to thank Teaching Textbooks for making the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing company, an amazing math curriculum, and you can check them out over at teachingtextbooks.com. And lastly, thank you to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or in ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more at samaritanministries.org/familyman, and we appreciate their support as well. But have a great week, and don't forget to smile.